Hey, this is Tom, and today I have another installment of my sculpting archives. This time, it's the first part of the year 2009. But before we dive into that, I have something really cool I want to share with you. I've been sculpting miniatures for about 20 years now, and I've been teaching others how to do it for at least half that time. Obviously, most ways people have encountered that is through my YouTube channel here. But I have been working on something new that I really am excited to share with you today. And that is a quick start guide, the ultimate quick start guide to sculpting miniatures that can help you kind of sift through everything. You know, there's a lot on the internet, even within my channel, everything's kind of scattered. So I've made this guide, and if you would like to join my newsletter, I'll send you the free guide. So click the link down in the description below and get the free guide.
The Rusted Heroes Witch Hunter is one of 3 characters I did that were part of kind of like a mercenary faction. So up until this point I had been working on Knights of the Rose and the Dragon Knights, but this was a chance to do some characters of a different take. And this first one was a lot of fun. This is the Witch Hunter, who obviously is very much inspired by Solomon Kane. As with all of the other figures for Rusted Heroes, I had to design them so that their arms, both hands, and their head were all separate pieces. That was a big catch for this miniature line, was making them interchangeable so you could have a little more variety. So everybody was designed, you know, with these longer gloves to help socket, give a little more range and control of where the weapons and equipment could be connected, and you can interchange them between each of the characters. One thing that was a little tricky on this guy specifically was that he, in theory, was supposed to kind of have longer hair. So I ended up having to kind of ball it up, bunch it up a little bit in the back. Clearly it's not flowing and going down his back, but it is, you know, looks a little bit like it's tucked down into his scarf, which was the element that I used to hide and make it look a little more natural where the head would join to the body. The revised SYMKAR Merchant for Dead General Society DGS games. This was the first figure that I got to do for them when they decided, they kind of reassessed what they wanted to do with their miniatures. So originally they had some very strict parameters about sizing for all their figures. Each race was very uniquely sized, height and scale appropriately. So, you know, women were a little shorter than men typically. Elves were a certain height compared to humans. And it was very strict, very calculated. And that was all good. I actually like working that way. However, the scale, the kind of baseline they started with was extremely small, as you can see here in this scale shot of the miniature. I mean, it's drastic. So what happened is, after I sculpted several of these figures, and a few other sculptors did as well, the team at DGS brought them in and reviewed them and decided that it just wasn't what they wanted and wasn't how they wanted to proceed. So to their credit, they went back to the sculptors and hired us again to revise several of our miniatures that needed some upscaling. And this brings us to the next revised miniature for DGS, the URDAGGAR Mystic. And as you can see here, same deal. There's the original miniature scaled with the new sculpt, and you can see how it compares to the SYMKAR Merchant as well. This is one of my favorite figures I've ever done. I had so much fun doing it the first time, and believe it or not, it was really nice to be able to go back to this figure a second time and redo it, just kind of refine things and be able to, you know, kind of practice. Most of the time you're working on different figures constantly, or maybe you're doing an army type of thing where you're making a bunch of the same guy, but it feels different. Like this felt almost like a chance to study my work and improve on it. So it was a really neat experience there. I didn't really talk about this, but in this, for these last 2 figures, you'll notice I've got a mix of green stuff and Procreate. I had done Procreate figures, but I was still going back and forth. I wasn't 100% sure that I was switching yet, and so I was going back and forth and playing. But you'll see here in a minute that I dive right in to full-on Procreate. The MERCS-CCC Assault Trooper. This was one of my favorite figures to do for the CCC MERCS squad for a long time. I love the hard moving forward firing stance, and as you can see, this is one of the times where I really started to move forward and get more comfortable with working in Procreate. I did basically the whole figure except for a couple accents using Procreate. This was another fun one here where I can't remember if it was just to have some variety or if we knew there was going to be multiple types of troops in this set. So we did two different heads. We have the helmeted one, which is my favorite. That helmet design that Keith Lowe did is just awesome. It is one of the things that energized me most about doing Mercs with him way back in the day. And then we just did an additional head that had no helmet on, just a little wrap, similar to what the sniper would have had. I do have a little bit of regret with how that head turned out. I don't know. I like the face and everything, but he should have had more in the back of his head. It just looks very kind of flat and like it's missing part of his cranium. So if I ever had to go back, that'd be something I'd redo. The Sci-Fi Chick Pilot. This miniature holds many firsts for me. It's the first in a series of 3 miniatures that I did. It's the first miniature that I used to launch my own personal miniatures line. I started out with Mercs, did that with Keith before went on and it became what it became. But this was my own unique boutique miniature line for myself. And this was also the first time that I used polyclay. Now I want to show you this. If you'll notice, you'll see a lot of Procreate. That's the darker gray, and then the green stuffs for some accents. But you'll see this lighter color in the body. And that was my first attempt at testing out and practicing using polyclay. But I want to share a couple interesting things about it. That is actually FIMO soft. If you watch this channel for any length of time, you know that I'm a huge fan of FIMO Professional polyclay. It's great, really durable stuff. Well, I don't even know how I ended up with it. I just had some FIMO soft. I knew it was polyclay. I knew you could sculpt with it, and that's what I used. But what I didn't realize is that stuff is a lot more brittle. And there were some other things that I did. I didn't know how to adhere the material to the sculpture. So what I did is I actually built up the figure, put a little bit of layer of green stuff on the armature first, and then after that was fully cured and set, then I started to put the clay on, and man, it would not stay on. That's one reason that you see where I've got portions of it sculpted in putty, and then I just tried that central area. I couldn't get it to stick, but I was determined to try it and make it work. So I was able to get it to stay put and stick just enough in that section. But as you see in this video here, when it went to mold, it totally fell apart. Anywhere there was clay, it just broke and fractured into nothing. Now that's a testament to my mold makers, Fortress Figures. Those guys are amazing, and they were actually able to get a totally good usable cavity out of that figure despite all of that. And that leaves you with this awesome looking miniature. I don't normally show painted versions of it, but here I wanted to show this because I'm just very proud and happy of this. My good friend Jody Cropholler painted this for me, Pezman, and he did a fantastic job of painting this figure, and I just love how it turned out. The female dwarf paladin for Reaper's Dark Heaven line. This made me realize that this is probably about the time that I stopped getting my greens back. I don't remember why that happened. I know some people wanted to keep them, and others, I think I just forgot to ask. Got sick of tracking it. I was too busy sculpting. So this is a fun character that I created based off of Talon's awesome artwork. I love working off that artwork. But I realized that I didn't even have original pictures. I don't know how that happened. And that kind of irks me because I love having a really good image record of all the miniatures that I've sculpted. Thankfully, Reaper still sells this figure and had some good shots on their website. One thing I really want to point out about this figure is you can see I went back to green stuff on it. So, like I said earlier, I was trying some figures in Procreate, but I still wasn't sure. Is this where I needed to go? Is this where I wanted to go? Maybe I still wanted to do things in green stuff. And that's why you see me keep flipping back and forth, and why I did this figure completely in green stuff. The MERCS-CCC Assault Leader. We'll close this part of 2009 out with another entry in the MERCS. As you see, I'm jumped back to Procreate. It definitely was, I mean, there's no doubt, it was the material that I much preferred over green stuff. I've said this before, I've never been super comfortable with green stuff. When Procreate came out, even though it's a very similar material, it does function a little bit differently, and I just felt so much more comfortable with it. As you can see here, I went ahead and used a precast helmet bit that we developed for the MERCS-CCC group. All of them had very similar helmets, but they were all a little bit different. But this core part was the same. So I went ahead and sculpted that from scratch originally, and we had it cast up, and then I would attach it to each of these individual figures in order to give them the kind of unique look that specific character needed. One thing you might notice about this figure is that he's basically all one piece. I think the backpack was a separate piece. We couldn't get away from that. But after doing, the sniper and the heavy, we decided we would come up with a pose that would be a lot easier for people to assemble and deal with. It makes him look pretty dynamic still, even with him kind of standing there in more of a kind of basic heroic pose. But we still wanted to have dynamic figures. I wanted to sculpt them that way, but we also didn't want to create a massive headache for the consumer as they're assembling these things. Thanks for joining me on part 1 of Tom's Sculpting Archives 2009. We'll be back with part 2 soon and show you the rest of the figures that I sculpted to finish out this year. But until next time, keep sculpting.